Okay, so I'm home, placement's done, and I wanted to take this opportunity now just to look back and give some tips on how I've used these videos to reflect on this placement. So when I first started this placement, I was very well aware that on previous placements I've dedicated a tremendous amount of time in the evenings after placement hours typing and writing up placements, and they've consumed so much of my evenings. So this time it just, I think I was just driving because on my way to placement, it just suddenly occurred to me, I thought, why not video them? And when I thought of it, it wasn't a case of video them to share them, and that's something I'm going to talk about in a second. It was literally because when I'm preparing for my OSCE exams, my practical exams and vivas, what I tend to do is I talk to Jodie, my fiance, I talk her through conditions, pathology, etiology, about in preparation. Now, I do that an awful lot. She doesn't always fully listen. She's brilliant, but I realised, a couple of years when I first started the degree, that actually I didn't need her to listen. It was just me sounding it out, which consolidated my knowledge. So I think that's where it kind of stemmed from. And I thought, well, what I'll do is I'll do pieces to camera. I'll just video my reflections, and it's worked absolutely incredibly well. And weirdly, and I didn't foresee this, but actually one of the biggest benefits has been watching them back. So as we know with communication, you get a lot of communication. Arguably 70% of communication is that non-verbal, what you see and hear rather than so what you see rather than what you hear. And the videos enable me to do that. So I look back on these when I've done my reflection, and I'm able to see so much more about how it's truly made me feel, things that I've thought about more than others, and my body language. It tells me an awful lot about that situation, far more than having written it down. And it only takes me as long as it does to talk it through. And that, for me, is usually about 15 minutes. I obviously posted this on Twitter, and it got an awful lot of attention in terms of a new idea. People seem to be quite open to actually changing the way that we potentially do reflections. As a student, it is absolutely essential, and that doesn't change when you become a qualified physiotherapist. So perhaps these might be useful. So I'm just going to talk through some specific things that I found that I would now either improve about the reflections, and my advice to people if they want to try this out. The first bit of advice is probably, I think they're equally important, but this is really, really key to make these work. And that is that when you do these reflections to camera, they have to be for you and not for an audience. And what I mean by that is, when we do reflections, they're a true account of how a situation that may have been not a brilliant one, and it's a true account of how that's made us feel, things that we maybe not will have done so well, and things that we want to tell ourselves we've done really well. Now, those three things don't lend themselves to being broadcast, because a lot of the times when we know that something is going to be shown to others, we are not ourselves, and social media is a great example of that. And so my advice to anyone wanting to do these pieces to camera, these video reflections, is from the offset, say the first 5-10 videos I am not going to share. They will not leave my personal computer. They are going to be for me and for me only. And try that way. That way, you're not going to be avoiding any. You're not going to sort of avoid sharing your true feelings. You're not going to avoid saying you messed up. You did something that you think you could have improved. You're going to be far more truthful, and I mean that in terms of that subconscious thing where we might suppress some of those if we know others are going to be watching it, if we're going to be sharing it. From that, and as you go through the reflections, there will then be some of those that you think, actually, do you know what? I think people might benefit from seeing this. Something that you may have learnt from a situation that you think others may benefit from, and that's fine, as long as you stick to your reflections, your video reflections being for you and you only. So that's my number one tip. The next tip has come from feedback from my educator on these. Really like the idea, but they mentioned and said to me that one of the things you want to really make sure of, and it's quite an obvious one really, is that you have tangible goals set at the end of them. And when you do these video reflections, it's easy to waffle and to be quite wordy, which to me comes very naturally. But that's fine, because they're for us and for you as an individual. But at the end of it, have something that might be written down or verbalized that gives you some smart objectives, some things that you are going to carry on forward from that reflection. So that is that what next. If you follow something like the so what, or what now kind of structure, it's that what now. What are you going to do with that learning experience, taking it forward to improve your practice, to improve yourself, or to improve your studies? So I always recommend using a structure. So SMART goals are great. So that's specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. And you'll notice I use relevant there for the R. Some people use realistic, but I think that's very closely aligned to that achievable. So I use a relevant. So make your goal specific, something that relates to that situation you want to improve, and this is how you're going to do it. Make it measurable, so you know whether you've done it or not. Make it achievable, so don't put something in place that's just completely non-achievable. Make it something that you can achieve, or certainly that's within your scope to achieve. Make it relevant to what you're trying to achieve, and then make it time bound. Give yourself a time when you're going to do it. So it might be from a certain experience I have. I feel I need to do this, and this. So going through the next 7 days, I'm going to try and implement that change. Or tomorrow, I'm going to implement this and that. Or it might even be over the next month or year, depending on what your goals are. But just make sure that you've got some specific, tangible goals at the end of your reflections. And for students, that's really important, because your educators want to see not just that you've been able to reflect on a practice and look at how it's made you feel and what went well and what didn't go well, but they want to see what you're going to do with that experience. What have you taken from that experience that you're going to take forward and change your practice? And that way you can then implement that change, look back, did it make a difference? How did that make you feel? Is it an improvement? And therefore you've got that cycle of reflection, improvement of practice, re-reflection, and your progression of the situation and how you deal with things. And that's essential when we graduate, and it's essential, I think, in everyday life. And these, I've said before that reflections now for me are not just a part of my physiotherapy career, but of my life personally as well. So those are kind of the couple of key things, is keeping these reflections true to what you need them for. Keep them to yourself if that helps. Don't be guided by what you feel other people want to hear or see. And then make sure that your reflections finish with some really good, solid goals that you're going to implement, that you can then review to see how they've gone. And then you've got that really good reflective practice model that we need to have. And you might want to write those up or use them on the video. And again, some of them you will want to share, that's fine, but don't make sharing your reflections the sole purpose of doing them, because that defeats the object and you won't get a true account of that reflective or that situation and how it's made you feel. So I think hopefully that's helped. If anyone's got any questions at all, please pop anything in the comments below, anything you'd want me to cover. And if you want to contact me, do so in the comments, and I can get back to you. I'm on Twitter at Physio Armstrong. You can contact me there. That's absolutely fine. I'd love to help people who want to give this a go. I think it's a different way of doing things. It will work for some people, it won't for others, but I think there's a lot of people out there that this may really well work for. It's been brilliant for me, and I'm going to be carrying on this for the time being, for as long as I can think, with a few tweaks as I've mentioned. So I hope that helps, and as always, back to the tea. Enjoy.